This is Eyewitness News. Now, David Ono, Laura Diaz, Johnny Mountain, and Bill Weir with the Southland's #1 news at 5.
A frightening flight in Orange County when a commuter plane prepares to crash and an Eyewitness News chopper responds to their distress calls. Hello, I'm Laura Diaz.
David Ono, here's the latest at 5 o'clock. A pilot and 2 passengers are safe on solid ground following a daring landing in Orange County. The Cessna was traveling from Corona to Hawthorne when it crashed into a high school baseball field in Fullerton. Eyewitness News Orange County Bureau Chief Jay Avila joins us live from Fullerton with more on this close call. Jay?
David, the pilot of that small plane, says he thought about trying to land on the street or at nearby Cal State Fullerton. However, he was worried about hurting people on the ground. So he sat down in this empty schoolyard, but not before making a last-minute call for help.
Moments before he crash-landed into an outfield fence in back of Troy High School, the pilot of the crippled Cessna put out a call for help on the radio frequency used by news helicopters and made contact with Scott Reif on board Air 7.
Just before 6 o'clock this morning, I received an emergency call on one of my radios from a pilot flying a Cessna 177, a Cardinal, that he had lost oil pressure.
Being an experienced pilot, he was aware of the frequency that the news helicopters used, and he contacted a news helicopter while he was looking for a place to land.
In his final transmission, the pilot said he was attempting to set down on the empty school field so that he wouldn't hit houses or cars.
We responded to Troy High School, and there we saw the plane moments after it had crashed. We immediately had our desk call Fullerton Police and Fire to respond.
As it turned out, the pilot's decision was a good one. The fuselage stayed intact, and the most serious injury was a broken arm suffered by one of his 2 passengers. The pilot, 53-year-old Dale Ploung, says the main reason he stayed on the radio with Air 7 during those frantic moments was because he wanted someone to know what had gone wrong in the event he didn't survive.
Something happened where I couldn't talk. I wanted somebody to be aware of what had transpired. I want to make it clear that if this had happened in the afternoon, I would have not landed at a school. But it was about 5 minutes to 6. The schoolyard was empty, familiar with the area, and there was no kids, so that's why we landed here.
The pilot and his 2 passengers commute to work by plane every day. He says he's been doing it for 20 years, and he's never before had to make an emergency landing. Reporting live from Fullerton, Jay Avila, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Laura, back to you.
Jay, thank you. A lot of quick thinking there. Well, spring showers have been falling on
Thanks.
parts
We'll look
of
for the latest on
Southland
CBS 2 News this evening at 5 o'clock. Now, in this story, 3 people truly, incredibly lucky to be alive this hour after surviving a devastating crash landing of their small private plane. Now, as you first saw live, as breaking news on CBS 2 News this morning, the pilot of a single-engine Cessna managed to land on a high school field in Fullerton early this morning and survived. CBS 2 News reporter Helen Kumari has the story.
Dale Ploung stumbles as he walks away from his plane. He can't believe he survived this crash landing.
I don't know if I close my eyes, but I really don't remember until I'm hanging upside down.
Dale was piloting the single-engine Cessna Cardinal from Corona to Hawthorne, as he has every workday for the last 20 years. The Boeing employee was also giving a ride to 2 Raytheon employees. Just before sunrise, the engine died over Fullerton.
We lost the oil pressure, then the engine started to vibrate and locked up and seized. We were trying to go into Hawthorne Airport. When it locked up, we came to the school here. I want to make it clear that if this had happened in the afternoon, I would have not landed at a school. But it was about 5 minutes to 6. The schoolyard was empty, familiar with the area, and there was no kids, so that's why we landed here. I flew it into the fence so I wouldn't hit one of these homes.
The plane flew into the 10-foot-tall fence at Troy High School's baseball field. Passenger Donna Sharp broke her left arm. Passenger David Simbar suffered cuts and bruises. Ploung, too, was cut on his face and neck. He won't take credit for everyone surviving. In fact, he feels guilt.
If somebody's hurt, that's not good. No, I feel terrible about her arm.
The NTSB is investigating what went wrong, but by any standard, a lot went right with everyone surviving. In Fullerton, Helen Kumari, CBS 2 News.
Cardinal Roger Mahoney is back in L.A. from his trip to
there in the baseball diamond. And 3 is the way this aircraft came in. It looks like you did a really good job. The damage is extensive, but it appears the injuries are moderate at the worst. It doesn't appear that the person that downed his injuries were serious. We'll be able to tell more when we see the type of treatment that he gets, but 2 of the people on board, all 3 appeared to be men, were able to walk away from the aircraft out towards the baseball diamond and get away from it quickly, just in case it would have caught fire.
Well, Scott, despite the look of the plane, it actually is good piloting that he was able to find an open space like that.
It certainly is. You know, he was headed for Fullerton Airport, and this location is probably about 3.5 miles due east of Fullerton Airport, right on the final. So he was headed that direction. I believe that was probably his intended destination. I'm not certain of that, but that certainly appears to be the case. 2 of the, I believe the man on the phone in the blue shirt and the other man on the right side in the jacket, the greenish colored jacket, were the 2 other people on board the airplane, and then of course the patient being treated was the 3rd, and depending on the type of treatment they give that individual, we'll be able to tell a little bit of the extensive nature of his injuries. But there are a lot of positives in this crash. It could have been much worse. If it would have been pitch black out here, the airplane could have came down on one of the homes in the area, and if it would have been the middle of the day, he could have been forced into an area where possibly there may have been students out on the field.
Well, you were saying that he was headed for the airport there, but how close was he to making it?
About 3 miles out. He's about 3 miles, just a little over 3 miles, right off the extended center line, due west of my location from Fullerton Airport. So it doesn't look like he was too far from actually making the runway itself.
Well, as I'm sure you've probably flown in that area a lot, you've flown a plane like that, you know that airport. My question would be, as you fly through there, do you also know this Troy High School? You know there's a field there? I mean, could this pilot have thought, okay, if I don't make it, I'm going to go to the high school or Cal State Fullerton there, and I'm going to have something? I mean, do you know that area well enough, having flown in there, that you know where to go not to hit a house?
I guess that all depends on the experience level in this area of that pilot. If he was en route to Fullerton Airport and he knew this area, then he knew that there are several baseball fields around this location. As I look out, there are several schools here. Cal State Fullerton, there's another high school to the south of me, and then several to the west. So he had a lot of options. Whether or not he actually knew this was the best place to go or not, you know, we don't know at this time. But if he knew the area, he obviously knew this was a good place to be. The best thing that he had going for him was that there was enough light for him to actually find one of these fields to land in, because another 30 minutes earlier it would have been pitch black and it would have been very difficult to tell if this was a parking lot of some type or exactly what it was you were going for. As a pilot, that would be a very tough decision.
Scott, since you were there moments after this crash occurred, can you show us the video that what you saw when you first arrived at the scene?
You know, Ellen, I don't think that we can at this time. There we go. Actually, we do have it. So they have rolled that back. You can see this is just moments after the crash. You have that man on the right side, and then you have, I believe, another man on the left side. The individual that was, there we go. We got another person coming out, and I believe those were the 2 that we showed you moments ago, and the 3rd person had already, the person with the most severe injuries had already gotten away from the aircraft. We're not certain if he got away.
Or are they trying to help him there in that video? It looks like he's reaching under.
Yeah, if I remember when we just first came up on scene, as I look at this, you can see how much darker
that's their bags.
Yeah, how much darker it is then. I believe that the crash had occurred. They'd already gotten away from the aircraft. Then they had come back to get their stuff, and now they're going back towards the person, the 3rd person that was injured the worst in this accident. So he was able to get away quickly immediately after the crash. There was no fire. Looks like they went back to get their belongings, and they were able to get over to the right side there, where we go back to the live shot, and the one person that was injured the worst in this accident.
Well, if there's any indicator, you don't like to speculate on the extent of someone's injuries, but going back to get your bags sure makes me think that they felt like their friend was at least okay, to the point where they could pull their belongings out of there. And yeah, that is good. Scott, we also saw it looked like the landing lights were still on that plane. So could that indicate anything?
Well, the landing lights were on. They were on for some time. I believe that someone may have gone in there and turned the power off. That's one of the things you do if you're able to as a pilot, is try and get the power to the aircraft shut off so that no sparks occur and then a fire. It looks like the accident itself could have been violent enough and disrupted the pilot so much that all he wanted to do was get out of the aircraft after the impact. But the lights were on the airplane, so I'm sure both landing lights were on high as he tried to make that approach and landing, that crash landing here to this baseball diamond. If we see there's the ambulance just now arriving on scene, so they'll be able to transport that patient to a hospital for further care. The other 2 men on board appear to be fine, but once again, what happens in these types of situations with whiplash and impact, spine injuries and things of that nature, sometimes it can take just a little bit before you realize how severe your injuries are. So obviously they are going to be very sore, and they'll be evaluated very thoroughly by the paramedics who are arriving.
And Scott, we're getting information from Fullerton Fire. They're saying that the man on the ground laying on his stomach has facial and leg injuries. One of the other men has a minor arm injury, and then no injury to the third man that we are seeing.
What we'd like to do now, since it's 6:13 and we've been with this for a few moments, let's just, if we can, Scott, for the folks that may be just waking up, just joining us, just coming to the television, you know, for the folks that have been with us, bear with us on this. We want to reset what exactly happened. You said just before 6 o'clock, you received a call on this that someone was losing oil pressure. We're just going to let everybody know what happened one more time, and then we're going to head on to weather. Could you just do that for us real quick?
Certainly will. That is correct. Just before 6 o'clock this morning on our air-to-air frequency, we heard an emergency call go out from this Cessna Cardinal saying that he had lost oil pressure and wondered if we could come and assist him, thinking that he was going to make Fullerton Airport. I lost communication with the aircraft, trying to find out a few more details. Then I heard a response from him that he was going down in this vicinity. We came here, we found the aircraft right as it crashed. Just moments afterwards, we relayed that to police and fire, who responded quickly for assistance. Fortunately, it appears that the injuries in this case are minor to moderate, and a very good job by the pilot to get this aircraft down into an area where it did not cause any further injury to anyone else or much property damage. So it could have been a lot worse. It looks like this plane made a crash landing, but everyone eventually here is going to be okay. Reporting live from Air 7 over the Fullerton area, I'm Scott Reif, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Philip and Ellen, back to you in the studio.
Okay, Scott, thank you very much. We did want to just for our own well-being, we don't want to just make you work that much longer. We wanted to see the guy actually get in the ambulance, just, I guess, for a little bit of closure on our part. We know he's in good hands at this point. We know he's going to be safe. I just think back to something you said a moment ago about a person that, you know, is laying on the ground even though they were able to escape the plane. Adrenaline is an amazing thing in a situation like that.
Oh, it certainly is, and the good thing about adrenaline in a lot of cases, it blocks the pain, and that's why I said to you earlier, in a lot of these types of situations, I've talked to guys who have been in very bad crashes before, initially your body just doesn't react to all of that pain and the injuries you have sustained, especially like in that horrible Metrolink crash that we had. You know, some of the people who originally got out probably didn't think that they were hurt too bad, but then as time wears on and the adrenaline goes down and you come out of the state of shock that you're in from what has happened to you, you start to realize the things that ache on your body. You start to realize things you didn't notice at first, and those things can become complicated and serious at times, even though they're not recognized immediately. So paramedics are obviously trained to try and determine the injuries that people have, and they're doing that now.
Anybody that's been in a car wreck 2 days after the fact knows exactly what what at least two of these guys with very minor injuries are going to face. Of course, the man with the leg injuries that you see here, facial injuries, and of course, since they're putting him on the backboard, they're being very careful that something else could be a problem. But you know, his injuries are probably a little more serious. But thankfully, yes, Scott, this looks like it's going to turn out in a positive manner. Let's take one more look at the plane if we can, and it is a shock to me that somebody was able to get out of that plane.
It's hard to believe. And
get to safety on their own.
Yeah. That's a great plane. I can tell you that much. They use those aircrafts for training. And there's really almost no better aircraft than a Cessna 172 or 182 to have to make a crash landing in. The approach speeds can be slowed down very, very slow, and the aircraft will fall apart like that. But the fuselage, in a lot of cases, stays intact. That airplane did exactly what it's supposed to do. It actually saved their lives.
Much like a race car. You know, some of those cars crashes can look so dramatic, but they're built to basically... The plane structure takes the impact away from the people inside, it seems.
Yep, and a very good job by the pilot, but just being able to get this thing down into this area. I can tell you that if that fence wasn't there, if the outfield fence of the baseball diamond wasn't there as we pull out a little bit, he probably would have landed that plane upright with little to no damage, to give you an idea how good his approach was. You can just tell how low he was, how he was coming in, very slow.
He might not have seen it at that time of day.
Yeah, I don't think he did. If you remember our tape, it was pretty dark when we arrived, and we were here just moments after the accident. He probably did not see the fence at all.
Scott, thank you very much. And again, thanks for, I'm sure those gentlemen would be thanking him right now for getting security or emergency personnel to him as quickly as possible. So good that they're in good hands now.
Yeah, right now let's check in with Johnny Mountain. He has
on board the ambulance that you see there. There were 3 people on board the Cessna Cardinal that crashed here at Troy High School just before 6 o'clock this morning after that aircraft lost oil pressure. 2 of them have just minor injuries. 1 had moderate injuries, it appears, and is being transported to a local hospital for further care. We have some tape that we shot early this morning. We were first to arrive on scene here after I heard the aircraft's pilot make an emergency distress call. He had lost oil pressure in his airplane. He was trying to make Fullerton Airport. He could not quite make it. He went to the baseball diamond, the field here at Troy High School in Fullerton, and crashed when he hit the outfield fence to the diamond itself. The airplane flipped over. 2 men were able to walk away from the plane with their own power. A 3rd person was taken away from the aircraft a bit from it, about 100 feet. He laid for about 30 minutes before emergency crews really arrived on the scene and gave him treatment. Now, we called fire and police immediately after we were first to spot this crash. They arrived quickly. Right now, it appears that they will have to investigate exactly what happened to the airplane that reportedly lost oil pressure. Fortunately, we can tell you that the injuries from this accident appear to be moderate to minor in nature, and that no one was injured on the ground. Reporting live from Air 7 over Fullerton, I'm Scott Reif, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Scott, that will surely be quite the sight for folks going to Troy High School this morning.
Breaking news in Fullerton, you're looking at a single-engine Cessna down on a baseball field in Fullerton, Troy High School. We'll have an update on that when we come back.
Welcome back to Eyewitness News at 6:44. And for those of you just waking up, come to the television screen and take a look at what happened this morning. Scott Reif joining us from Fullerton, where there was a plane crash just before 6. Scott?
Yes, Philip, just before 6 o'clock this morning, I talked to the pilot of that plane right there, a 1975 177B Cessna Cardinal, who has lost oil pressure in his aircraft. He asked for our assistance. We called emergency crews to the scene as quickly as possible. There were 3 people on board, 2 with minor injuries, 1 with moderate injuries. The airplane made a crash landing here after losing the engine, we believe, due to an oil pressure loss at Troy High School in Fullerton. Fortunately, the injuries were minor. There was no one on the baseball diamond. It was early in the morning. Crews here still on the scene, and the NTSB will be investigating. Reporting live from Air 7 over Fullerton, I'm Scott Reif, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Philip and Ellen, back to you.
Scott, good work. Thank you very much. We'll check on that.
Oh, and we have more breaking news now. We want to go back to Fullerton very quickly to Scott Reif. Scott.
Philip, you're looking at the wreckage of that Cessna Cardinal that made a crash landing here at Troy High School just before 6 o'clock this morning after losing oil pressure. I believe we have a ground shot of this as well from our camera. Now, this happened as we got first initial notification of this from the pilot over an air-to-air frequency that he had lost oil pressure trying to make Fullerton Airport. The aircraft is based out of Corona. Crash happened just before 6 o'clock here at the baseball field at Troy High School. Fortunately, even though that airplane is badly damaged, the injuries to the 3 on board were minor to moderate. Reporting live from Air 7 over Fullerton, I'm Scott Reif, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Scott, thank you. We have more information on that.
We want to apologize. Angelina Jolie, the interview was supposed to be today because of the plane crash. We weren't able to get to it. We will have it on Monday. Her film, Life or Something Like It, debuts tonight.
Johnny at 7:22. 3 people were able to walk away from a plane crash on a high school baseball field in Fullerton. The pilot made an emergency call just before 6 this morning. Air 7 was overhead as emergency crews responded to the scene at Troy High School. It was a single-engine Cessna. 2 men and a woman were on board. They sustained minor to moderate injuries. Time to check the eyewitness crash landing of that Cessna plane in Fullerton. We're learning the plane is registered out of Corona in Riverside County, and the pilot made an emergency call just before 6 o'clock this morning. Air 7 heard the call and responded. The plane crashed on a baseball field at Troy High School. 3 people were on board. They sustained minor to moderate injuries.
The very lucky pilot of a small plane and his 2 passengers survived a terrifying crash landing in Fullerton. Now, this story began to unfold this morning when our own Air 7 pilot Scott Reif heard the pilot's emergency call for help. That pilot was en route from Corona to Hawthorne when his small plane lost power and he was forced to land on the grounds of Troy High School in Fullerton. That's where we join Orange County Bureau Chief Jay Avila, standing by with the story. Jay.
Mark, just a few minutes ago, the wreckage of that small plane was removed from the baseball field here behind the high school. That distress call picked up by Air 7 was made by the pilot as he was frantically searching for a safe place to land.
The pilot of the crippled Cessna says he purposely crash-landed through an outfield fence on the Troy High School baseball field because it was the only way he could avoid houses, cars, and people on the ground.
I want to make it clear that if this had happened in the afternoon, I would have not landed at a school. But it was about 5 minutes to 6. The schoolyard was empty, familiar with the area, and there was no kids, so that's why we landed here.
I think he did a heck of a job. He made a conscious decision to impact the fence and not go into the homes. That was the first thing he told me.
The pilot, 53-year-old Dale Ploung, didn't have much time to select a landing spot. His 4-seater aircraft suddenly lost power as he and 2 of his friends were using it to commute to work early this morning. An experienced pilot, Ploung put out a call for help on the radio frequency used by news helicopters and made contact with Scott Reif on board Air 7.
Just before 6 o'clock this morning, I received an emergency call on one of my radios from a pilot flying a Cessna 177, a Cardinal, that he had lost oil pressure. We responded to Troy High School, and there we saw the plane moments after it had crashed. We immediately had our desk call Fullerton Police and Fire to respond.
As you can see, Ploung suffered some scratches to his face, and one of his passengers, 46-year-old Donna Scharf of Murrieta, was taken to the hospital with a broken arm. But thanks to the pilot's skill and quick decision-making, no one else was hurt.
The 2 passengers work at Raytheon, the pilot at Boeing. He says he's been commuting by plane for 20 years because he can't handle the freeways, but he seemed to handle this morning's emergency just fine. Live from Fullerton, Jay Avila, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Michelle, back to you.
Oh, he sure did. Jay, thank you. The engineer involved in Tuesday.
This is Eyewitness News. Now, David Ono, Laura Diaz, Johnny Moulton, and Bill Weir with the Southland's #1 News at 5.
A frightening flight in Orange County when a commuter plane prepares to crash and an Eyewitness News chopper responds to their distress calls. Hello, I'm Laura Diaz.
David Ono, here's the latest at 5 o'clock. A pilot and 2 passengers are safe on solid ground following a daring landing in Orange County. The Cessna was traveling from Corona to Hawthorne when it crashed into a high school baseball field in Fullerton. Eyewitness News Orange County Bureau Chief Jay Avila joins us live from Fullerton with more on this close call. Jay?
David, the pilot of that small plane, says he thought about trying to land on the street or at nearby Cal State Fullerton. However, he was worried about hurting people on the ground. So he sat down in this empty schoolyard, but not before making a last-minute call for help.
Moments before he crash-landed into an outfield fence in back of Troy High School, the pilot of the crippled Cessna put out a call for help on the radio frequency used by news helicopters and made contact with Scott Reif on board Air 7.
Just before 6 o'clock this morning, I received an emergency call on one of my radios from a pilot flying a Cessna 177, a Cardinal, that he had lost oil pressure.
Being an experienced pilot, he was aware of the frequency that the news helicopters used, and he contacted a news helicopter while he was looking for a place to land.
In his final transmission, the pilot said he was attempting to set down on the empty school field so that he wouldn't hit houses or cars.
We responded to Troy High School, and there we saw the plane moments after it had crashed. We immediately had our desk call Fullerton Police and Fire to respond.
As it turned out, the pilot's decision was a good one. The fuselage stayed intact, and the most serious injury was a broken arm suffered by one of his 2 passengers. The pilot, 53-year-old Dale Ploung, says the main reason he stayed on the radio with Air 7 during those frantic moments was because he wanted someone to know what had gone wrong in the event he didn't survive.
Something happened where I couldn't talk. I wanted somebody to be aware of what had transpired. I want to make it clear that if this had happened in the afternoon, I would have not landed at a school. But it was about 5 minutes to 6. The schoolyard was empty, familiar with the area, and there was no kids, so that's why we landed here.
The pilot and his 2 passengers commute to work by plane every day. He says he's been doing it for 20 years and he's never before had to make an emergency landing. Reporting live from Fullerton, Jay Avila, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Laura, back to you.
Jay, thank you. A lot of quick thinking there. Well, spring showers have been falling.
All three people aboard a doomed commuter plane in Orange County are alive and well tonight. Pilot Dale Ploung and his 2 passengers were on their way from Corona to Hawthorne this morning to work when their Cessna suddenly lost oil pressure. The quick-thinking pilot took aim at a baseball field at Troy High School in Fullerton.
I want to make it clear that if this had happened in the afternoon, I would have not landed at a school. But it was about 5 minutes to 6. The schoolyard was empty, familiar with the area, and there was no kids, so that's why we landed here.
He actually put out a distress call that our own Scott Reif heard in Air 7. Scott called the authorities, and he had steered the plane into the park fence at some 80 miles an hour, managed to survive, but one passenger suffered a broken arm.
Rain is falling over parts of the...
Gene?
All right, Rod, thanks.
Thank you, Rod. And there's much more news coming up this
Female that looked like she was the most severely injured has a broken arm, but the 2 males on board, one including that being the pilot, we believe, has just suffered some minor injuries that are okay. So that is such great news. They definitely had their angels around them. This is a Cessna 177 Cardinal that was apparently losing oil pressure commuting from Corona Airport to Hawthorne. And they ended up coming down here at Troy High School, which is right next to Cal State University Fullerton. Apparently their landing was pretty smooth, but they smashed then into this chain link fence that surrounds this baseball diamond. And that apparently then is what caused so much of the damage to the airplane itself. Emergency crews really quickly responded here. Great job done by the fire department. And you can see already the ambulance is taking the one woman, we believe, with the broken arm away. So some very, very, very good news. Unfortunately, not good news for the plane itself, but at least the people inside had survived, and there was no fire that broke out from the situation, and that can quickly occur. So that's also a good news as well. All right, let's go ahead and go. 3 people aboard the plane walked away. We believe actually that the police are actually talking to perhaps the pilot of this plane. They commute from Corona to Hawthorne. They work in the aerospace industry, and apparently this Cessna 177 Cardinal was experiencing some loss of oil pressure, caused the plane to go down here at Troy High School, smashed though into the fence, and that's what caused apparently most of the damage to the plane itself. But the good news is there was no fire that broke out, and the 3 people were able to walk away. We're hearing that the men just suffered some minor injuries, and the woman that we had seen that had her face to the ground since this occurred, even though she was able to walk away, has apparently a broken arm. She's already been transported to a nearby hospital. So that is the very latest. Again, this is a Cessna 177 Cardinal. It crashed about 20 minutes ago. All 3 people aboard have survived and seem to be in pretty good condition. I'm Jennifer York at Skycam 5. Back to you in the studio.
Okay, Jen.
All right, Jen. Let's
Thank you very much.
Take you up to Jennifer York and check on that situation in that plane crash situation near Troy High School.
Yeah, again, we have bad news and we have good news. Of course, the bad news is the plane crash itself. It was a loss of oil pressure that occurred. This is an individual that commutes from Corona to Hawthorne. He works in the aerospace industry, and apparently in the past, this individual has had to make an emergency landing because of a loss of oil pressure. Now, he had 2 other people aboard. The fortunate news about this is that they all walked away. The 2 men apparently with just minor injuries, that being one of them being the pilot, of course. The other woman suffers a broken arm. She's already been transported to a nearby hospital. They landed at Troy High School, which is just west of Cal State Fullerton here, just north of Chapman, west of State College, and they were fortunate enough to be able to land at this baseball diamond. The thing apparently, the tough part was that he crashed through that chain link fence, and that's what caused so much damage apparently to the plane. The good news, of course, it didn't break out in a fire, and all 3 were able to walk away from this crash. This happened about 45 minutes ago. I'm Jennifer York at Skycam 5. Back to you in the studio.
Miss Jennifer, thank you. Coming up.
Good morning, I'm Jim Nash in Fullerton. Behind me, you see the wreckage of a Cessna 177 Cardinal. It crashed here on this Troy High School athletic field this morning. 3 people walked away miraculously, and we'll have the live report on this coming right up.
I'm Eric Spillman from Hollywood. This is the KTLA Morning News with Carlos Amezcua, Giselle Fernandez, Mark Kriske, Sam Rubin, and the entire KTLA Morning News team.
Good morning. We begin with breaking news in Fullerton.
There has been a plane crash. Jennifer is over the scene. Jen?
Well, yes, we have good news and bad news. The bad news, of course, is that the plane badly damaged here. The good news that all 3, as Jim Nash reported, have walked away. We watched this just right after it transpired. We were able to see them transport one of the individuals
that was part of this commuter plane situation. It was a woman who had apparently a broken arm, but that was it. That's the extent of the serious injuries. He does fly out of Corona. He commutes to Hawthorne every morning. He does take a carpool, as you would say, or a plane pool of individuals that work in the aerospace industry. This happened about 6 o'clock this morning. This is a Cessna 177B Cardinal. It was apparently purchased from Sutter Aviation in Phoenix, Arizona in 1984, and it has suffered from oil pressure situations in the past, and that is what caused this plane crash this morning, a loss of oil pressure. For more information, let's go to Jim Nash on the ground. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. We're down here on the athletic field of Troy High School, and behind us, you see, just 100 yards away there, is the mangled wreckage of that Cessna 177 Cardinal. Hard to believe that 3 people walked away from it. A couple of witnesses that we talked to just briefly said that they saw the landing. It was an emergency landing. The pilot brought it in, crashed through a fence. You see a lot of damage to the aircraft, but apparently the worst injury was to one of the women passengers on board, a broken arm. We are efforting pictures of her. We will bring them to you very shortly. Pictures of her and the other people being treated. Apparently the pilot and the other male passenger walked away from this with only cuts and bruises. Again, an amazing landing job. This all happened after the pilot began radioing to one of the control towers that he was losing oil pressure. He had reported the same problem a couple of months ago with this same aircraft. And so the good news is that despite how bad it looks, it apparently is a miraculous emergency landing, because 3 people's lives have been saved here due to the efforts of this pilot that brought this plane down on this athletic field here in Fullerton. Carlos, Giselle?
As we look at the pictures there from the sky, you can see that the fence was torn away, so perhaps he touched down and then toppled over. Is that the sense you get there on the ground, Jim?
That's what witnesses are telling us, that he just came in basically from the east and plowed through that fence. A lot of damage to the aircraft, but again, amazing. These people basically walked away from it. And as I say, we'll have pictures momentarily to show you within 10 minutes or so of the injured person, a woman with her arm being set, apparently a broken arm. That's the most serious injury that happened in this crash this morning.
Incredible and absolutely minor in comparison what that mangled wreckage looks like. These people are very lucky this morning, and just an incredible thing to walk away from virtually unscathed.
Jim Nash, Jennifer York, thanks very much for that. Of course, we're going to continue to follow that story this morning and bring you the latest details. Mark, a little cloudy out there?
In the news at this hour, a dramatic plane crash this morning in Fullerton that ended well.
Yeah, Jim Nash is there on the scene. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Carlos and Giselle. Yes, we're here on the athletic field of Troy High School in Fullerton. Right over there, you see the wreckage of that Cessna 177 Cardinal. Hard to believe 3 people got out of that alive. 2 of them walked away with cuts and bruises. We have pictures of the most seriously injured person, a woman, one of the commuters on that flight from Corona to Hawthorne, and we have just gotten confirmation of her name from the Fullerton Police Department. Her name is Donna Scharf. She is one of the commuters that rides on this flight almost daily. They're aerospace workers who fly from Corona to Hawthorne. Again, the pilot was radioed that he was losing oil pressure on that flight, and so he looked for a place to land, and this is where he brought it down. One of the people that actually saw this flight come down is Brian Allen. He's a Fullerton resident. You were dropping off your son right here. From this perspective, what did you see?
Just saw the plane come in directly over the treetops there, touched down in the first part of grass that you can see. He traveled about 200 feet on the ground, hit the fence, flipped in just over directly the way he was coming, exactly the way that he is not facing, the way he is.
Flipped over.
He flipped over. Now he's going back the other direction now.
Did you hear an engine?
No engine. I heard no sound at all. Probably mechanical problems, I would think.
Did you see the people get out?
The pilot immediately, he stepped right out of the plane just the minute it hit. I mean, he rolled right out of the plane. I didn't see the other 2 people get out.
Pretty miraculous. All right, thank you very much, Brian Allen. Yeah, again, we are live here in Fullerton at the scene of this accident, this crash of this Cessna, a single-engine plane, and again, 3 people's lives saved, apparently due to the tremendous efforts of the pilot that brought the plane down on this athletic field. Carlos, Giselle, back to you.
Thank Jim. Our hats off to that pilot, and thank God those 3 people walked away from that crash, because it didn't look like anyone could walk away from that wreckage.
I know. It did look horrible, but it's an amazing story, amazing end to that. Okay, Mark, what's going on with the weather?
Good morning, I'm Jim Nash in Fullerton, next to Troy Athletic Field here at the high school. There you see the Cessna 177 Cardinal that came down, crash landed here this morning. 3 people miraculously got out of it alive, and we'll have a live report.
First this morning in the news. Well, call it incredible pilot skill. 3 people have walked away from a plane crash in Fullerton this morning. Excuse me.
It's like a miracle. It really is. Jim Nash is at the scene. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Giselle, Carlos. Yeah, this could have been so much worse. We're here in Fullerton at Troy High School. Back there, you see the wreckage of the Cessna 177 Cardinal that came down from the east and crash landed into a fence there. 3 people got out of this alive. The most seriously injured was a woman on board. We have pictures of her being treated by paramedics at the scene. We have learned from police here in Fullerton, her name is Donna Scharf. She's a regular passenger on this commuter flight. She's being treated for a broken arm at a local hospital. The 2 men on board, the pilot and the other passenger, walked away with with bumps and bruises. Now, we also have other tape here to show you. Bill Smith, our reporter, a year ago did a story on this pilot, Dale Ploung of Corona, who's an aerospace worker in Hawthorne, and a lot of his friends get on board this plane every day. They help him pay for the gas. They beat the traffic. They fly over there to go to work. A couple of months ago, he reported oil pressure and problems and made an emergency landing. He was reporting that to a tower at the same problem today, losing pressure, and he came down here in this field. He was looking for a spot. He found this high school athletic field, and it wouldn't have even been a crash landing if he hadn't hit that fence. Now, one of the people that saw this crash was Brian Allen of Fullerton. He was dropping off his son here at the high school. Here's what he told us.
Just saw the plane come in directly over the treetops there, touched down in the first part of grass that you can see. He traveled about 200 feet on the ground, hit the fence, he flipped over. Now he's going back the other direction now.
Did you hear an engine?
No engine. I heard no sound at all. Probably mechanical problems, I would think.
Did you see the people get out?
The pilot immediately, he stepped right out of the plane just the minute it hit. I mean, he rolled right out of the plane. I didn't see the other 2 people get out.
And other witnesses to this crash also told us that they did not hear an engine as the plane came down. One said she heard sputtering and then no sound at all. So apparently he lost power, again, due to a lack of oil pressure. He came down here, and amazingly, nobody killed. This could have been so much worse. Carlos and Giselle.
Boy, you said it.
Amazing is indeed the right word. Yeah. All right, thanks very much, Jim.
Our other top story this morning.
Plus, an airplane crashes at a local high school. We'll have the full story.
A Southland pilot used his skill to keep his airplane away from homes as it crashed this morning in Fullerton. As fate would have it, the pilot and passengers were people we've met before here on News at 10. Jim Nash has this report.
A Cessna 177 Cardinal is a pile of wreckage after its pilot made an emergency landing on the Troy High School athletic field in Fullerton. None of the homes all around were hit because the plane was stopped by a chain-link fence.
I flew it into the fence so I wouldn't hit one of these homes.
Pilot Dale Ploung walked away with cuts on his face. One of his 2 passengers, Donna Scharf, received compound fractures of her left arm. Another passenger, David Simbor, had only bumps and bruises. 2 years ago, the same plane and the same people were the subject of KTLA reporter Bill Smith's story about plane pooling for these Corona aerospace workers who commute daily to their jobs in Hawthorne. Smith told the story of pilot Dale Ploung and the others in today's accident, including passenger Donna Scharf.
No fear of flying?
No, actually, the first time I tried it, I really liked it. I was very enthusiastic from the first time I tried it.
But just before 6 this morning, the single-engine Cessna suddenly lost oil pressure, and then the engine locked up, forcing Dale Ploung to make some split-second decisions about where to land.
I want to make it clear that if this had happened in the afternoon, I would have not landed at a school. But it was about 5 minutes to 6. The schoolyard was empty.
I think he did a heck of a job. He made a conscious decision to impact the fence and not go into the homes. That was the first thing he told me.
You've got to be glad to be alive. Yeah, I guess. I always thought I could do better than this. So,
not too bad.
Well, the people that saw it said it was great.
if somebody's hurt, that's not good.
And that somebody is Donna Scharf in St. Jude Hospital tonight, no doubt reflecting on a commute that she and her friends will never forget. In Fullerton, Jim Nash, KTLA News.
A 5-alarm
in nature, and that no one was injured on the ground. Reporting live from Air 7 over Fullerton, I'm Scott Reif, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Scott, thank you. It will surely be quite the sight for folks going to Troy High School this morning.
Crashed here in the baseball field, Cessna 177 Cardinal that crashed here at the baseball field at Troy High School. On the belly there, you can see all of that. That appears to be the oil. The pilot radioed Skyfox pilot Kevin Walton, said he was having oil pressure problems and he may have to set down. He was trying to make Fullerton Airport, and there you can see it appears that he may have spilled his oil overboard. All right, let's pull out and pan over to the right. We're going to show you the gentleman we believe to be the pilot of the aircraft. We got this from one of our colleagues listening to the frequencies. We believe it's this gentleman here. Notice he's got 2 cell phones in his hand. He also has some sort of a cut or bruise on his forehead. There were 4 people on the plane. 3 of them made it out. 1 apparently injured, and that appeared to be a woman. She was treated by paramedics at the scene. And is the ambulance still there? I can't see. Yeah, the ambulance is still there, so paramedics are still working on her in the ambulance, and then she'll be taken to a local hospital. Again, if we pull out wide, give you set the scene for you. This is the baseball field at Troy High School, and there you can see the plane came down just short of the outfield fence, plowed through the outfield fence, and that caused, or it's likely what caused a lot of the damage to the aircraft. We understand that this is a commuter flight. It flies Monday through Friday from Corona Airport into Hawthorne Airport. 4 people were on board. At least one of them seriously injured and being treated by paramedics now and will be taken to a hospital. Fullerton Fire Department, Fullerton Police Department on scene very, very quickly, and now it's going to be up to the NTSB to figure out just what happened. Rick, Gene?
All right, Rod, thanks.
Thank you, Rod. And there's much more news coming up this.
But at least the people inside had survived, and there was no fire that broke out from the situation, and that can quickly occur. So that's also a good news as well. All right, let's go ahead and go to. We have a signal working on
outside the fence here. It was still dark out. The pilot reported loss of oil pressure, and what we've heard is that the pilot landed the plane safely, and that as he was traveling along the field here, hit this fence, and that's what caused the plane to tumble and sits there in the condition that you see it. Hard to believe that anybody's walked away from this crash at all. David, Kelly?
Thank you very much, James. We'll top in our news at 6:30.
As bad as this looks, none of the 3 people on board this small plane was seriously hurt today. The plane crash landed this morning in Troy High School baseball field in Fullerton after the plane developed mechanical problems.
The world's
A small plane crashes into a high school baseball field in Fullerton. We're live. It's our top story this morning.
From NBC4, this is the Channel 4 News at 11 a.m.
Fullerton students arrived at school this morning to find this, a crumpled airplane scattered across their baseball field. The small plane crashed early this morning after its engine failed. Good morning. This is the Channel 4 News at 11 a.m. I'm David Cruz.
And I'm Jennifer Bjorklund in for Kelly Mack.
Our top story at 11 a.m. Investigators say a quick-thinking pilot saved the lives of everyone on board the small plane that crashed into the baseball field early this morning. Vicki Vargas is live right now in the community of Fullerton where it happened. She has more. Vicki.
David, that baseball field is right here at Troy High School where tow trucks are in place preparing to haul that plane out of here. The pilot says he knew he was in trouble over Placentia, that he dropped 1,800 feet in 90 seconds. Pilot Dale Ploung, understandably dazed, but definitely not confused. The 53-year-old Corona man says his single-engine Cessna lost oil pressure, then all power. So he aimed the $80,000 plane at an empty baseball field at Troy High School. Then, to avoid nearby homes, he purposefully plowed into a 10-foot-high chain-link fence.
You could see the fence coming, and it was about 5 seconds before hitting the fence. We thought it was going to be an emergency landing, and then 5 seconds before the fence, we realized it was going to be a crash.
Passenger Donna Scharf suffered a broken arm. Injuries to David Seinberg, another passenger, were minor.
I don't know. I don't know if I closed my eyes, but I really don't remember until I'm hanging upside down.
The field was empty at 6 o'clock this morning, the baseball team at a breakfast meeting.
What if this happened around like 2 o'clock when we're practicing or something? It's really weird to think about. They usually have recreational games on Fridays, I think they play dodgeball or football out on the fields here. We're just lucky, again, like I said, that didn't happen.
National Transportation Safety Board investigators arrived this morning trying to find out why the plane failed.
Things happen very quickly in a three-dimensional environment, and it's easy to look and say, well, why didn't he land on the grass? He made a conscious decision based on what he thought was a threat to the homes, and I think he did a great job.
Back here live, investigators still on the scene, as we said, trying to figure out what happened. The pilot says he wanted to make it very clear that if it were not for the time of day, he never would have landed his plane here. Live in Fullerton, I'm Vicki Vargas, Channel 4 News. Take a look.
Talk about being a lucky person. Take a look at this crash scene. The pilot and his two passengers walking away. You're going to hear their story of survival.
Making plans for your big summer vacation?
Sonia, thank you. Investigators say a quick-thinking pilot saved the lives of everyone on his plane that crashed into a high school baseball field. This is what students at Troy High School in Fullerton saw when they arrived at school this morning. A small plane crumpled in the baseball field. The pilot made an emergency landing when his engine lost oil pressure. Amazingly, all three people on board survived the crash.
I want to make it clear that if this had happened in the afternoon, I would have not landed at a school. But it was about 5 minutes to 6. The schoolyard was empty, familiar with the area, and there was no kids, so that's why we landed here.
The pilot and the two passengers used the plane to commute, flying every day from Corona to Hawthorne.
Up next.
Plus, a local high school baseball field becomes a runway for a small plane in trouble. You'll hear from the pilot.
And what a difference 10 years
Michelle,
makes.
thank you. A plane crash landed on a high school baseball field in Fullerton early this morning with 3 people on board. The pilot was apparently trying to land the Cessna on the grounds of Troy High School near Fullerton College when the plane hit a fence.
You could see the fence coming, and it was about 5 seconds before hitting the fence. We thought it was going to be an emergency landing, and then 5 seconds before the fence, we realized it was going to be a crash.
The plane was on a commuter flight from Corona to Hawthorne. One passenger ended up with a broken arm. The pilot and the other passengers had only minor injuries. Investigators...
This is ABC 7 Los Angeles. Now, David Ono, Ellen Leyva, and Johnny Mountain with Eyewitness News this morning at 6.
News right now in Hawthorne, and Scott Reif is over this scene. An emergency landing, Scott?
That's correct, Ellen. We're watching a Cessna 172 on final to Hawthorne Airport. Now, the pilot reported he has some type of blown seal in the engine and oil all over the windshield. He's having a hard time seeing. Also, moments ago, he told Hawthorne Tower that he was having a high oil pressure reading. He may have to shut the engine down and glide in. Right now, he's about a quarter mile out on final to Hawthorne Airport. Everything seems to be okay right now. We don't see any smoke. The tower is asking us that, so that's good news. I believe this may be a traffic watch airplane. I'm not certain about that, but it appears to be a Cessna 172. Right now, only about a quarter mile out from landing on final to Hawthorne Airport. He has declared an emergency as some type of engine problem. Last report was oil that spattered onto the windshield, making visibility tough for the pilot, and also a high oil temperature reading. He may have to shut down the engine. So if you bear with us for a moment, we'll follow this airplane in. It appears that now he is shutting down the engine. I'm hearing his report to the tower. The pilot is shutting down the engine. You can see his flaps are down now. And it appears that he'll be landing at Hawthorne Airport any moment. It does appear that he's going to have the glide ratio, and he is going to be able to make it to the airport. At least that's what we're hoping. So bear with us here. An emergency landing being made at Hawthorne Airport by the Cessna 172, just coming up on short final now to the airport. In a moment, you'll start to see the runway. It does appear that he's going to make it safely, and it appears it's a great job by the pilot. But we'll watch this at the very end as this airplane touches down.
You said it would be it's an oil pressure problem, oil splattered onto his windshield, and I guess the reason for turning off the engine would be obviously too dangerous to land with the engine on, considering that problem?
I think at this point in time that he knows he can make the airport. He wants to glide in. He's got an oil temperature problem. He doesn't want the engine to overheat or seize up at this time, which would actually cause a little more drag. He's on short final right now, just coming up on the threshold to runway 25 at Hawthorne Airport. It appears that everything is going to be okay. You know, these Cessna 172s can almost slow to a stop, it seems, when they land. They come down to about 40 miles an hour. But the airplane is down safely. You can see the engine was shut down as he made the landing. So a great job by the pilot. We're going to get in front front of him a little bit and push in if we can without losing this shot, and show you the oil that came up out of the engine cowling there.
Oh yeah, I see it right now.
Yeah, you can see that he had a difficult time because of visibility. He did shut the engine down. He did do a real good job.
Boy.
That's nice to see.
That is a lot of oil on that windshield too, Scott. All right, smooth landing. Thank goodness for that. Thank you, Scott, for that coverage. We'll check in with you in a little while. In the meantime, gas prices
right here on Eyewitness News. This morning, this Cessna reportedly blew a seal, which caused an oil leak. Smoke filled the cockpit, but the pilot stayed calm and managed to make an emergency landing right here at Hawthorne Municipal Airport. The plane touched down safely without any problems. He shut the engine down as soon as he hit the ground there. You can see a big streak of what appears to be that dark oil could be seen on the windshield of the plane coming from the propeller. Everybody on board is fine, a little bit shaken, but otherwise okay.
Still ahead, a police officer